Hi everybody, welcome to the next episode of the FinOps on Azure podcast. Today we're joined by my good friend Sandro. Sandro's based out of Portugal, a long-term integration guy. Sandro, we go back for many years in the MVP space. The reason I asked Sandro to join us is as one of the leading integration experts, he builds solutions with Azure Integration services, and I wanted to learn more about the kinds of discussions that Sandro has with customers when it comes to cost management for integration. And I also wanted to learn more about how you think about things like estimation, cost optimization, and stuff like that. So welcome to the podcast, Sandro. Can you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you for the invitation, by the way. I'm based in Portugal. We know for many years. I think first time was in 2011 in the MVP Summit in Seattle. At least in person, no. I'm the head of integration at Devscope, a consultant company based in Porto, Portugal. And I'm the lead of the enterprise integration team. So that means that I work in the integration space using Microsoft tools, BizTalk Server and Azure Integration Server. This is what me and my team do every day for the last years. Me, at least almost 18 years, I'm doing that. And I'm only work on the enterprise integration space. So yeah.
Awesome. So jumping into cost stuff then, Sandro. So when you're starting to talk to a customer who wants an integration solution, let's assume they're going down the Azure route. What are the kind of things that the customer asks you about, or you have to present to the customer to tell them how a solution is going to be sustainable and cost effective?
Well, when I go to the client, and it also depends a little bit on the footprint and experience of the client in Azure, but normally they want go jump to the solution. They have the requirements, they have to do this type of integration, and they think that they are going directly to the solution, implementing the solution. But normally I bring a little bit back the scope, and I try to speak about in general the specifications and best practice of how we are going to mount that integration in Azure. If they already have something, if yes, what are the kind of naming convention that we are going to use, best practice in terms of environments, all of these tag policies, resource users policies, and only then we are going to jump on the project itself. Because I think by building the base structure of your integration solutions is going to be the best way to start a project. So if you don't have that base ground build, if you go directly, I think many things go wrong in the long running. So because sometimes the client doesn't have nothing inside Azure, and they think that they need a logic app, and they don't need a logic app. They need way more than a logic app. They need the security policies, because no one remembers that, but at the end we are going to have these applications in a secure way, access policies, deployment policies, all of these, and then jumping directly to and later only the last item is going to be start building the solution. So
when you talk about that base bit, then so I guess a lot of the customers you speak to are going to be BizTalk to Azure migration, so they're going to have a very different cost model. If you compare what your costs would look like on Azure versus what your costs would look like on premise for BizTalk, can you talk a little bit about what the differences between those are?
Well, they are huge. So in BizTalk, especially if you are a developer, you don't care about pricing. Okay, that's it. You go there. the client buys the license in advance, they pay the hardware, and that's it. So only if there is a crazy scenario that you need high volumes and you have to go and add new machines and you pay more license. So the cost is easy to calculate. You pay per license. So you start small. If you need more, you put another machine, you know that you're going to pay that license. It's a fixed price. Okay, that's it. You will not be surprised at the end of the month that you are going to pay a huge bill because you already paid that. That's it. At least in the old days. Now, if it's in Azure, you have to be careful about the VM that you're using. But again, it's a VM, it's a fixed price.
So it's very much the typical stepped price and pay up front kind of model. Maybe you've got software assurance would be the recurring piece. Okay, so what about on the Azure side then? How do you guys find that?
Yeah, in Azure is a little bit nightmare. So if it's a new customer, they are always trying to demand on you to tell the price. We know a little bit. We can estimate a little bit with the calculators and the resources that we are going to use. You may pay this amount of money, but it's an estimation. That's it, because they will tell you. Probably is 100 messages, but in reality they are 10,000 messages. So even they sometimes don't know what is the volume of that we are dealing. But we do an estimation. We have a rough estimation, but that's just estimation. You may get surprised at the end of the month. No?
Yeah.
In many cases, I already see the client surprised at the end of the month. No?
So I guess that's one of the challenges of integration. Is I think in the past it used to be just a performance and scaling challenge around how many messages a day do I get, and then it was often a finger in the air guess. Well, then you've over provisioned your BizTalk environment and it would just handle it. But I guess now because you're paying more line to per message, the number of messages really is a significant impact on the cost, isn't it?
Exactly. Especially if it's consumption based. If it's computers based, we have a little more control. But I think to add this, and that's the reason I always try, before I jump to the projects, start to build the base ground, the foundations, is if the client has a good policy in terms of what resources we should use for each type of requirements they have, that's going to control better. Because if me as a consultant write to a client and they say, Sandro, you have to build this solution, I can build that solution in many ways. Okay, I can be crazy and go for premium stuff, and that's going to be cost. But if I'm not allowed to decide, except if I have a good story and a good reason why I'm going, if the company has policies about saying, oh, if you want to do a workflow, it has to be with LogicApp, okay? That it's going to be LogicApp standard or consumption, then depending on the requirement and the policy they have, we can go for the one or the other. Yeah. But it's not giving the decision to the consultants based on what they like. Then you can control better the prices. You are not going, you may be a little bit surprised because of a problem or some mistake that happened and there was a lot of message and we pay more. But if you have that bound policies in place, the architecture, integration design, what pieces to use in each requirement, then you can easily control a little bit the prices. You will not get surprised.
So do you have like favorite resources you prefer to use because it makes costing easier to estimate?
Oh, sure. So I think if you speak about enterprise integration, there are at least 4 that I say that's mandatory for me. API management, LogicApp, and add-ons. LogicApp in general can be consumption or standard. Okay? LogicApp, API management, Azure functions, service bus, and key vaults. So these are in top of my list because it doesn't need to be created in day zero, but it's on the middleware on the cloud platform or design. Okay,
Yeah.
at some point we are going to need that pieces. We are going to need that resources. If it's going premium, standard, it depends. I like to start small and get bigger. Okay, I'm not going to create from day zero a service bus enterprise, because no one needs an enterprise or a premium service bus on day zero. So you can start with a basic, go to the standard, basic, and then basic, standard.
That's a really good
premium.
So that's a really good point there. So I guess tip one would be start small and grow. But then I guess nowadays a lot of companies will build their platform with things like a landing zone, which might influence their choices to be certain SKUs. And then I guess if you have things like network, and it pushes you towards more premium SKUs in a number of cases as well. What's your view on kind of the balance to get that effective?
I was never the guy that liked one-click solutions. I think one-click solutions are a template that many people can use, but that's going to be costly at the starting point. I like, again, start small, because a landing zone we can create a landing zone. It's the basic resources that you are going to need to create all of this. So that's going to be kind of a template that you can deploy it in kind of one go and have all of these already prepared. But the problem is that they're going to cost at the starting point. So you're kind of saying that do not use BizTalk because you pay upfront, but with landing zones, it seems you pay upfront nevertheless. No, because you are going to create stuff that you are not going to use. Still, you are paying in advance. No, so yeah, depending on the client, we can go for a landing zone. But all my clients, I never had the need to go from day zero for a landing zone. We are starting to create the API management, configure the API management, most of the times they already have BNet integration for, and it's not going to be me that's going to create that stuff, because no one allow us to do that. But they don't know what is integration, and I don't know what is networking, at least in Azure, because I can play my subscription, but no one allows me to go to the BNet and play that on the client. So I have a mixed feeling about landing zones.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. So with so let's assume you've started building your integration platform. We talked a little bit about some of the challenges of estimation, particularly with integration projects where you need a good idea of volume to predict certain things. So when it comes to during the implementation, how do you guys kind of track actual costs versus estimates? So, you mentioned that sometimes the customer might get a surprise bill if things, if they process 1 million messages when they're expecting 1,000. But how do you guys kind of track that during the project to understand if things are going to be different to what you initially thought?
Most of the times we don't. That's the reality. So first, normally don't have access to the costs inside the client. As a consultant, we don't have that kind of access. Most of the clients do not control very well the costs until we see after a few months the invoices. And I already have some experience with some clients complaining about some solutions that then we end up to optimize. But the reality is that many customers, especially the ones that start, they can be big companies or small companies. Okay, so if they have not a good footprint experience on Azure, they are not going to have all of these policies about tagging resources, deciding the tags based on on the project. So in order to control all of these costs by project and so on and so forth. No? So it's going to be difficult for many clients to analyze and keep track of that costs.
So that idea of like democratizing cost, and it's one of the kind of key FinOps foundation principles, is let the people who build and run the solution see how much it costs and take ownership of it. So that's really re-emphasizing the importance of that point, I think, from what you're saying there.
At some point, yes, but at some point, it's not the client, the consultant that has kind of these capabilities or experience. It also depends. Or I can go to a client and say, okay, you are going to pay way cheaper if you do a large cap consumption. You don't need a large cap standard. But if they tell me, it's policy that I have to go for a standard, let's go to cost. So there is no cost control there. Okay, so it's a decision, it's a policy of the companies that they want that. Okay, later on they may regret that, and they came to the decision to reduce costs. But it's kind of a balance between requirements, policy of the company, and the consultants. It's trade-off triangle. It's not direct science that you say I apply this rule and it's always correct. So depending on the clients and depending on the organizations and the consultants, they can change a little bit. I try to adapt and go according to the client's policy clients and my recommendations. I always try to put some recommendations up front. And we end to an agreement, and after that, let's try to implement that in a cost-safe perspective.
So I'm gonna just share my screen, show people one of your blog articles for the next question. I'm also gonna just slide this camera along slightly. So one of the things I wanted to learn about, I know you write a lot of blog articles. You're one of the most popular bloggers in the integration area. You've wrote quite a lot of articles about optimizing costs. Some of them we've chatted about before a few times. So here's one about the skip triggers. We've also got one about push versus pull. So I just wanted to kind of make people aware of them. And what I wanted to do question-wise, so I'm just going to stop the screen share now. In terms of cost optimization, what do you think are some of the ones that you found the most interesting on an integration platform?
So one of the biggest that I found was that one, pull or push.
I'll get that article up again and we can have a look at it while we're talking about it.
And I even at the end I put some numbers, and they are real numbers. So I omit the client, but they are real. It was a real project, and there was a significant improvement of the costs. And the reason why, and it came along the first part of the talk. At that point, it was not, the client didn't have a good footprint on Azure, or especially on the integration on Azure. And this was a pilot they built, and the goal was to process a few messages and synchronize them to another system. So the only kind of requirement, because I was not involved on that project at the beginning, was that they want to use service bus for a proof of concept also. So they were trying to put the message on service bus and then pull that message and synchronize to another system. And they did a good job. I'm not saying they did a bad job. They did a good job, but they did premium stuff. They put near real-time integration. So, and that means event terms or event reads, no? And you know that to connect that to service bus, you have to go premium, not standard. Okay, so and the cost by service bus premium to a standard or basic, it's huge. Okay. On this project, the client asked me to help them put that solution in production. They didn't ask me to optimize. They asked me to help them put in production. And I told them, at least let me know the solution so I know what I'm putting in production. So, and the first question I did to the guy say, do you know how many you are paying for this integration? And the response that they told me that I don't know, but they already spent the budget. And I put some numbers up front. And the reality is that they were processing 100 messages per day in a non-critical environment. They don't really have the need for real-time integration. So by just modifying the solution architecture, instead of being that real near-time integration, and push instead of we remove the pushing and put the pulling, and we had a huge amount of savings. Even if the trigger is pulling without nothing, it was dramatic, the savings that we had on that project. So that came also that in the old days in BizTalk, we didn't care about the costs, because we just were using the resources of the machine, and that's it. So as long as the machine support that, we can implement in any crazy way. In Azure, as a developer, I think it's important you also have a little bit about what is costing in Azure, because if you are going to have the freedom to do all of this, you can go crazy, but you are not paying. The client will pay, and at the end they are going to be unhappy.
And they're going to be committed to paying as well for a long time, potentially, aren't they?
Yeah. So I try to avoid these cost savings in a developer perspective, and not in the traditional saving cost perspective on Azure, because I think that plays also an important role in cost savings.
So I think one of the ones we chatted a while ago about was a little bit different, because this one here is really about optimizing the message processing, but I think you told me about one where you were doing mapping in a different way, so you designed a slightly different design pattern which would reduce your costs by removing the need for an Azure resource. Tell me a bit more about that one.
Yeah, so you know that if you want to apply a transformation like migrating a BizTalk solution that uses a lot of XML and mappings, if you want to do XSLT transformation on Azure, by default, you need to use an integration account. Okay. Nowadays, if you use standard, we have the data mapper, and we support Logic App Standard supports XSLT transformation by default. We don't need an integration account, but the direction was going to the integration account. That already had an improved and changed a little bit about the costings that integration account has nowadays. So they have, I think, different tiers. But in the old days, it was quite expensive for storing XSLTs. I like integration account if you use ADI stuff. ADI stuff, you need an integration account. But for storing schemas, I don't think it's a waste of money to pay 1,000 euros per month just to store schemas, because, well, what is a storage account for that? It's behind the scenes, we have a storage account, and we have kind of a function to do that a process to execute that maps. So we can actually do the same by creating ourselves a storage account and simple create an Azure function. It can be a consumption Azure function that we have, I don't know how many executions for free per day, and we can achieve the same in a smart way and save 1,000 euros per month, guaranteed.
Yeah. So it's almost like you went from having like a PaaS integration account that does the map for you, write your own function, you take on a little bit of overhead because you maintain the code, but then your running cost is probably pennies a month versus $1,000 a month kind of thing. Which is it's quite an interesting, as an architect, there's a good question about when you would choose to build versus buy. Really, is the what that boils down to, isn't it? And,
Exactly.
I think in that case, you felt that you got much more value for money by having your own function do it, which is quite good.
In long running, for the client, it's better to spend a little bit more upfront for developing that piece of software, that service. But in the long running, if they are 1 year mapping measures, you will have that savings in a quick while. So in 1 month, 2 months, you save all of that money that you spend developing a function. And you don't need to actually at the moment you don't need to spend too much, because I have the functions available on GitHub, so you can download it, fine tuning, and that's it.
So, another cool open source project. If anyone who's new to this doesn't know, Sandro has some really good open source stuff, like the Visio stencil for Azure is one of my favorites, and there's quite a few other things Sandro's done. So it's really worth spending a little bit of time having a look at his blog to check out some of those resources. I think if I remember right, Sandro, they're up at the top, aren't they? We've got a little menu here.
Yeah. Resources I have now there. Recently, all my GitHub projects, at least the main ones, but you have the link there, and then you can navigate on GitHub and you find a lot of stuff, Azure stuff, and BizTalk stuff. So
yeah, brilliant. Okay, so question-wise, so if we take a little bit of a steer away from the optimizations for a minute, Sandro, I want to think more about people and process. So when you're doing an integration project, who are some of the people who typically would ask you about costs in the company? Is it really like the project sponsors? Do you ever have people like testers caring about how much things are going to cost? Do people ever test the costs? Is it the support people that ask about that kind of thing?
I think in the beginning, unless you are a starting client and you kind of bring the cost in the equation on the beginning, in that case, yes, we have to kind of speak with the sponsor or the IT guy, manager of the IT, to see the cost and estimations. But if you are already a client that has a good footprint on Azure, that question disappears often. So no one cares a little about the costs. But what I'm seeing now is that after a while, and especially now on these critical economic times, that we see that all companies are suffering a little, and the order is to reduce costs. No matter if you are a big customer or a small customer, cost reduction is a hot topic nowadays. I think that that question will arise later on the lifetime of the project. So on the beginning, kind of no one cares, no one controls. But after a while, after 1 year, when they see the costs and say, can we reduce the costs? Then we came back to the project and try to optimize a little better. I think this is kind of the pattern that normally happens.
What do you? So just as a side question of what you said, what do you feel the customer's perspective is on cost reduction versus waste elimination? Do you think that's something that customers really even think about in your case? Because obviously cost's not a bad thing if you get a return on the investment.
Yeah.
But, you know what I mean? So just arbitrarily reducing cost isn't necessarily a good thing, because you might introduce other problems. But to me, waste's the way that we've been trying to think about it a lot. Is if I've got waste, can I, like your thing before you redesigned, you can get rid of waste by getting rid of that integration account's a good example. Is that how you see customers think about it, or do you think they just think about cost reduction?
A little bit. So they don't. we have to kind of realize that most of these guys came from a world that everything was on premise. No one cares about the cost because they were upfronting. So if the machine was turned on for turn off, the cost was the same. So they pay a little bit of electricity probably, but that's not going to be dramatic. In Azure, it's different, no? And most of these people were not, even me. We were not used to have this. Okay, I know that Azure has more than 10 years, but 10 years is really a small period of time to people to adapt. No, especially these bureaucratic companies. So this kind of waste that happens in all the organizations, no one cares. Or in the past, no one would care about that because it didn't cost any too much money. Now, having a VM running without doing nothing costs money, and costs a significant. Depending on the machine, can cost a huge amount of money. So they start kind of reducing costs by VMs. I saw that in the beginning. If the VM was a dev VM, turn off the dev VM. There was a nightmare because there was no kind of automation. They didn't have that. Now it's a little bit better. So they start kind of closing these wastes that they are spending. But there are a lot of wasting they are not really know that happens. Okay, I think it's difficult for a manager or a project supporter to understand why he has to have a service first premium against a standard. Because he maybe not a technical guy. He doesn't need to be a technical guy, but he has to have someone to delegate that and say we need that for these reasons. So kind of understanding the ways, because if someone asks why you need premium, I need premium for that, but what is the facts? Understanding the facts and what is the reason behind that, I think is kind of difficult to understand by default with using what Azure will provide us. Okay, it's doable, but it's difficult to troubleshoot that. Okay, to analyze all of this information.
So the last question I'd like to talk to you about, Sandro, was about shared resources. So I think one of the things that's really interesting in an integration platform is, or certainly that's different if I've compared to just a standard application. Normally an application's just a box with a bunch of stuff in it, and I can really easily say, cost for that box is X, that's what my application costs. But in an integration platform, we know that you tend to have, hundreds of integrations used by different teams and departments. So you want to work out how much do the 10 integrations for HR cost versus the 10 for finance. And then we also have shared resources. So things like I might have a data gateway VM, I might have Service Bus Premium and APIM that are used by multiple different integrations. How do you find the balance between, from a cost management perspective, the balance between shared resources versus specific resources? And do you tend to favor one versus the other?
Well, it's easier nowadays. Let's say with Azure, it's easier to justify share resources. I had this fight for a long time. I went to a client in the old days, and they had 4 BizTalk environments running the same application, kind of, in different boxes. And I told them, why you need these in different boxes? You can have only one boxes and support all of these payloads. The amount of messages that you are sending and receiving, you just need one boxes. You don't need 4 BizTalk and pay 4 times the number of licenses in your organization. And they say it's because of isolation. So you can produce isolation still with a single box. But no, everyone wants access and so on and so forth. All of that discussion, and BizTalk was not a good story about accessing, because you have to have permission for everything, except if you don't have other tools. In Azure, it's quite more simple because you have kind of these privileges that what you can see and who can access and create and so on and so forth. So it's going to be a good story for discussing that. And when people realize, we still find clients that they say, I want a dedicated resource because every resource has to be independent by application. They will suffer with costs, and then they go back and fix that, all of this stuff, because premium stuff means you need to share. That's kind of the base rule. It's too expensive to be dedicated for something, except if you have a good reason for that. Okay, if you have really an application that really needs an enterprise because of the volume, I don't know, crazy stuff, then you can dedicate that. Of course that, but like API management is shared by the applications. So you don't have an API management for each application. Service Bus Premium is going to be shared across all of these enterprise applications. You control who writes, who reads based on access policies. That's how you do that. How you save money. Of course, you can have a crazy solution, say, no, I am dedicated, but then, sorry, but that's going to be expensive. Yeah? So in Azure, we have a better story and it can justify the reason why shared resource happens. And as a developer, okay, there are stuff that why you need to create over and over again to do the exact same stuff in your solutions. One simple stuff. How do you get the error message of a logic app? You have to have a function or something that calls the REST API to get that error message. Are you going to build that same story over and over again for each application? Or do you have a shared function that do that? Okay? That's kind of in the old days, a customer assembly that we shared across all the projects, no?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's really good to have those. It's choices, isn't it? You know, beforehand we were very constrained as to what we could and couldn't do, whereas now you've almost got too many choices, really, haven't you? And but it's a nice problem to have in a way. It's better than having no choices, I guess. So
that's why you need policies to implement that best practice about implementation. So if the organization also have developer policies, what to do in most common situations, then you have kind of you have to follow that rules, and that's going to be easy to implement.
So Sandro, I think we're just coming up to the end of the podcast. I hope the audience really likes this session. It's good to chat to experienced architecture people to sort of discuss how cost factors into the things that they're thinking about when they're designing and building solutions. So I really enjoyed that, Sandro. Would you like to sort of shout out on any activities you're doing for people to check out if they want to learn a bit more about some of your integration stuff?
I try to keep the blog update with some of the tips, tricks, and some stuff that I start using, like error handlings, errors and solutions that I'm starting to do also in the same for Azure. I start this year every Friday to share a fact. It can be a fan fact. It's a reality. Good, bad. It's something that is doable. It's a fact. That's why it's called Friday Fact. I hope people will follow that and give feedback.
Perfect. So thank you for joining us today, Sandro. I hope everybody has a really great week, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of FinOps on Azure.
See you.